Hello, everyone. As you're coming in, if you could let us know where you're tuning in from, that'd be awesome. And I'll just go ahead and get started. I'm Omar Acevedo. I'm the Literary Program Coordinator at the Mark Twain House and Museum here in Hartford, Connecticut. And I'm delighted to host tonight's program. The Mark Twain House and Museum's virtual programs are produced in part with support honoring Frank Lord, a beloved trustee of the museum who passed away a few years ago. We are happy to honor his memory with these programs. We are also incredibly grateful to the Wish You Well Foundation and Connecticut Public WNPR for supporting this and our other virtual programs. Now let me introduce our guests. Tonight we welcome Rasheed Newson and Edwin Sanchez for a discussion of My Government Means to Kill Me, Rasheed's new novel about a young gay Black man in the mid-1980s coming of age in the midst of a political and social reckoning. Our moderator is Edwin Sanchez. He is a playwright and professor at Wesleyan University. His plays have been produced in the US and around the world. He is also the author of the novel The Diary of a Puerto Rican Demigod, which will be launched as a podcast next year. Our author is Rasheed Newson. A graduate of Georgetown University, he is now a writer and producer of several TV shows, including Bel Air, The Chi, and Narcos. My Government Means to Kill Me is his debut novel. We encourage you to have a conversation in the chat along with our guests. If you have a specific question, you can post that directly into our Q&A section. Please also note that you can click on live transcript to see live auto captioning of this event. And that's all for me, so please sit back and enjoy. Over to you, Edwin and Rasheed.
Okay, you can. Oh, okay. The host hasn't started my video, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to have the video. Oh, okay. Okay, I did. Oh, okay, good. Okay. There I am.
It all worked out.
Okay, so the first thing I always ask any writer is, when did you know you could tell a story?
I think that came probably in grade school. I came from a pretty lively family, so telling stories is what we did around the table, normally on other people who had acted a fool or done something particularly funny. And being able to sort of tell other people, well, let me tell you what my aunt said this weekend or what my grandpa did, was something that's sort of like an early talent.
Do you remember the first time you got paid for writing? And you realize, oh wow, I get paid for this.
I don't remember. I wasn't so much paid, but I can tell you the first time I won. It's so specific.
Oh yeah. Okay.
There was a poetry contest put on by the Indianapolis Recorder, the Black newspaper in Indianapolis, and the prize was like a swag bag and tickets to see Poetic Justice. And I was in love with Tupac. I love Janet Jackson too, but Tupac was the draw, and I entered it, and I was like 14 years old, and I got second or third place. And I got to go to the premiere, and I got this bag. And the thing that hit me was that the people running it were surprised that I was a teenager. The other two people were adults. They didn't put an age limit on it, and I didn't realize that. So it dawned on me that I'd beaten out other adults to get this and to win this prize. So that was the first time I thought, I think I'm probably pretty good at this.
Wow. What was the inspiration for the novel?
I mean, there's a positive answer, and then there's a.
I want both. I want
the whole catty answer. Well, the positive answer is that I've spent my entire life wondering what I would have been like if I'd been old enough to participate. I'm born in 1979, so I was a child when these events took place, but they were in the air, and I was aware of them. So I've always sort of just wondered what that would be like. The other part of it is I've worked in television for 15 years now, and television is wonderful. I love it. It's great to kind of collaborate with all these other artists. But also what happens in television is you have to worry about making your characters sympathetic. And
Yes.
we often sort of take the edges off of people. And I wanted to write something that didn't pander to the wide audience. I wanted to write characters that just said, here I am, and you can take it or leave it.
I've got to say that's one of the things that really attracted me to the book so much was Trey, the main character, is likable and unlikable.
Yeah.
But you always give him his logic when he's being unlikable. We don't have to agree with him,
No,
but
no.
it's coming from his logic. I can understand how he got to his conclusion, even if I'm saying Rustin is right, back off.
Well, and it's also, I mean, it's what being 17, 18, 19, 20 years old is all about.
Yes.
You don't have a lot of experience to draw from. So you're making decisions on instinct. You're making decisions on untested ideas of how you think the world should work. And that can be very beautiful, and it can also be very frustrating to watch.
How much of Earl, of Trey, his full name is Earl Trey, but he goes by Trey.
Yeah.
How much of Trey was you at that age?
It was, you know, I started with myself as sort of like to get the mix going, but I decided if this was going to work, he was going to have to be braver than me, and he was going to have to be more reckless than me if we were going to have a story. And so, but the idea of someone who finds it hard, like, you know, is generally irrepressible, someone who spent most of their lives going, oh, why couldn't I watch my mouth, or why did I have to go off and say that thing? That's me. That's still me. But he pushes it a lot further than I think I would have.
I'm always amazed at how often he lands on his feet. I mean, after one of those episodes, the Fred Trump episode, where I'm like, there is no way he's going to come out of this, and he somehow does.
Well, in my experience of life is you win, but never in the way you think you're going to win. You know, it didn't turn out exactly like he had hoped, but he's able to take enough from it to move on to the next place. But again, that's been my life experience. They mentioned I went to Georgetown University. I didn't actually have enough money to go to Georgetown. So what happened is people who knew me from church and the community donated to this fund so that I could pay my tuition. And I showed up before, and I'd gotten admitted, and I went there for a visit, and I explained to the person of financial aid that this is how I was going to pay for things. And she looked at me, she goes, don't tell that to anybody else again. All of that is against the rules. They will take your scholarship away. You need to do that and just stay quiet about it. Which is to say, I'd found a way to go to college, but it was completely not the way it was supposed to work. And I got lucky because I went and ran my big mouth, but I told the one person who wasn't going to turn me in.
Wow. Good. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. And I remember when I got the acceptance letter, I just hid it. Because I said, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I won't know anything. I won't know anything. I can't go. So I love that part about it. I got to say, when I was reading the book, it's a weird thing to say. I felt seen. I felt really seen. And it's a total page turner. But after every lesson, I would have to put, because the book, for those of you who haven't read it yet, is divided in life lessons. And every chapter is a lesson that Trey goes through, and what he learns from it. And after every lesson, I would have to put the book down because so many memories would wash over me. And so many of the places you would mention, I said, oh, I remember that place. Because I was actually a little older than he was at that age. So I knew all the places you mentioned. I said, oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah.
Eddie, that makes me feel so good, because, you know, your fear when you're writing it and you think you've done your research and you think you've got it all mapped out. And your fear is that someone's going to come to you and go, that wasn't right. It wasn't like that at all. How dare you? Or and not to pick on New Yorkers, though I think of myself as very LA. New Yorkers love to tell you about the past of New York, and love to tell you that they've got a sort of proprietary stamp on, let me tell you what the real New York was like. So I've been very fortunate that I think that people haven't sort of, that people have sort of accepted this and haven't sort of come at me in a way that said, oh, here's what you got wrong.
I know you also interviewed your uncle. Tell us a little about that.
My uncle is 14 years older than me, and was in that sort of awareness, and it was sort of just a question of trying. What I thought was really good from him in terms of talking about certain people was he kept reminding me we didn't know what was going to happen, which sounds really like, oh, but of course it's hard when you write about the past not to slant it too much.
Yes.
Like your characters know what's coming. And so his big thing was we thought it was the end of the world. We thought it could kill every single one of us, that there was no stopping it. And I thought, oh, okay. And so I kept trying to tap into that. The other thing I think he helped me with was remembering that, like, Larry Kramer, I was like, I was talking about him, I was like, oh, he's an icon. And he's like, well, he wasn't in 1985. In 1985, he's not yet the guy he's going to become or the image he's going to become. He's still somebody, but he's approachable. And I thought, oh, okay, that helped me. Those two things helped me a lot.
Yeah, I think years later, someone wrote, David Drake wrote a one-man show called The Night Larry Kramer Kissed Me. And it was about how Larry Kramer changed his life.
Yeah.
I got to say, one of the beautiful things you do in the book that I want to know how you did it is you are able to combine the personal, the political, and the sexual in one book. And usually they say you got to leave out the sexual if you're going to do the political, or you got to do this, but you can't do that. Did you get any pushback at all?
No, I mean, I got very lucky. I think both my lit agent, Jim McCarthy, and my editor, Naji Nieto at Flatiron, I think that's part of what attracted them to the book, was that we were going to speak honestly about that part of it. I mean, you have someone in this book who is part of the movement to try to get this country to do something about the AIDS epidemic, and is working at a hospice with men dying of HIV and AIDS. Yeah. And yet he's also going out and having sex, and not always protected sex. And I think, one of the things that's happened in all the distance from this time is we can be a little bit more honest about what was going on.
Yes.
I think when you look at sometimes the early works are writing about AIDS, they are telling you as much truth as they think the general public can handle, right? And if we give you suddenly a hero who's out there having irresponsible sex, so to speak, you're worried you're going to lose the audience, or that they're going to miss every other point and fixate on that.
Exactly.
But we've got enough time. Everybody's grown. I can tell you now, Virginia, there is no Santa Claus. And yes, people who fought this still had sex, and sometimes unprotected sex. And I wanted that to all be part of the mix, because I believe that's the truth of it.
Well, one of the gorgeous things you do is you make the Mount Morris Baths a friendly place to hang out. And yes, Trey goes there, so does Rustin. It's a place he goes to for sex, but it's not only for sex. It becomes a social club where he can talk to people. And I thought that was really beautifully handled, that we didn't have to pretend that those didn't exist.
Oh no, and also, I probably came in on the tail end of bathhouse culture. I mean, God help how it's doing now after the virus and all. I mean, I heard of them shutting down, but in my early 20s out here in LA, I would go to them. And some nights it's slow, some nights it's just the regulars. I mean, one of my favorite memories is we were all just hanging in the lounge and Jeopardy was on. And as a group, we all just started answering the questions on Jeopardy. This is almost a wholesome scene. And then you just remember everybody's naked in a towel and it's a bathhouse.
That I thought was an excellent part of the book. And now the Mount Morris Baths has become a temple, I think, or a church in Harlem.
Yeah. Right now, I was there recently, and it seems to be almost empty. I mean, there was there were some storefronts along one side, and the stairs to the basement was all sort of locked up and boarded up. So I don't know what it's going to become, but I want it so desperately to get inside, but I couldn't.
Quick question, and then I'll let go of the Mount Morris Bathhouse.
Oh, sure, no.
I'm fascinated by it. it started before 1958.
Oh yeah, it had been there since the Harlem Renaissance. I mean, I want to say when it. I mean, 1893 is what I'm remembering. Is when it
as
first,
a gay bathhouse.
as a bathhouse, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
just as
Okay.
you know, when did it become gay? It was that, you know, that sort of Turkish bath sort of thing. But I mean, but certainly by the Harlem Renaissance, it was Black and it was gay.
What surprised you the most with all the research you did?
And it shouldn't have surprised me. But what did surprise me is, like, you know, when we talk about the civil rights movement, you talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and the bus boycott, he's incredibly young. And that theme, that thing that there were young people, sometimes in their 20s, taking on major leadership roles in a movement with no grand plan, that happens over and over again in the women's movement, in the Vietnam, anti-Vietnam War movement, and in the gay liberation movement. And it's encouraging, and I hope it's encouraging to young people. I mean, as we fight for our political lives now, that the young people can be right up front and play significant roles. They don't need to wait their turn, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. One of the chapters that affected me incredibly was when he talks about what happened to his brother Michael.
Mm-hmm.
That couldn't have been easy to write, even if you're creating it from the ground up, even if it's just from sand. It is such a staggering story, and Trey never forgives himself for that.
Yeah, I think there are some things we probably can never forgive ourselves for. I mean, it turned out to me to be the key to him. There are several points in this story where Trey won't leave another person behind, even though he easily could, even though other people are telling him he should. And he just decides, I cannot abandon this person. And it had to stem from somewhere. And I think of those things that, you know, normally you look to family life. And I think what he can't forgive himself for is that he did abandon his brother to tragic effect.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's going to be the one thing he's never going to do again, even when it costs him a great deal.
Did you have that piece of his puzzle in place before you sat down to write, or did that come to you as you were writing?
I'll tell you something about Trey. I wrote a novel before this that was a multi-generational story about the Singleton family in Indianapolis, and Trey was a part of it. He was in the third generation.
So wait, Lady Fiona existed before? Because I'm obsessed with
Yes.
her.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
And has her own history and her own backstory, and I know where she's going and where she's been. Yeah, no, she was something. And so all of those I had this entire novel that I was really proud of and loved. We took it out with my lit agent at the time. I believe over almost the course of 6 months or 7 months, we sent it to 40 different editors who all said no. So the book died, and I was devastated. And I thought, you know, I mean, by the way, and it was a book I thought like my grandmother could read. Like I thought, it's a family story.
Yeah.
There was nothing salacious about it in the sense. And yet it died. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this one more time, then I'll just do this the way I want to really do this. And Trey in that book had already gone to New York at 17. And so I said, well, why don't I just follow him? I know that character. He's been in something else I wrote about. I took 2 years to write. So I've got his voice. I know everything you could know about his background, going back 3 generations before he was born. So I was fully prepared, and that had happened in the previous book because he'd lost of his brother, and so I said, well, we'll just carry it into the next one.
I would love for you to read a section, but before that, what you just said about how he could never leave someone behind. You know how the light bulb hits you like a second after everything. I finished the book. I was totally like just so taken with it, and then I realized what you just said. I said, that's why he had to find the solution for Angie.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't leave her behind. even
And
though
everybody
everybody
else was
told
saying,
her.
do it. And everybody else was
Yes.
willing.
And they were like, I'm sorry, you sort of have to wash your hands and take a step back.
Yeah.
Okay. See, the final piece of the puzzle for me falls into place.
I love it.
So yes, would you read a section of it, please?
I'm going to read, yes, I'm going to read a section. I'll tell you why I chose this section, because it's something I love about volunteerism and advocacy work. When I was in college in Georgetown, I used to volunteer as a caretaker at Grandma's House, which was this sort of foster care house for children who were HIV positive or had AIDS. And, you know, it's sad to say, but in the 90s, Black children in particular had sort of been abandoned, and there was like no place to put them, and foster families didn't want to take them in. So there was this organization that sort of started and said, called itself Grandma's House, because everybody's welcome at Grandma's House. And so I would go, and the first day I went to volunteer, they just throw you into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you gotta, it's just, there's no like just observe and figure out where to jump in. They take you, those kids take you by the hand and you're in. And so this is the section I'm going to read is Trey going to the hospice that is run by Angie, and it's Renegade,
Yes.
sort of off the books, mostly catering to Black men. There are a couple white people there. And this is how, on his first day, this is how Trey gets sort of let in. On the first day, Peter stood back and watched me, offering no guidance or judgment. One old man, it was hard to place ages because the disease did such a number on the faces and bodies back then, told me where the vodka was stashed in the kitchen and asked for a glass. Peter didn't say a word as I retrieved the liquor, poured a shot, and held it to the old man's lips as he drunk it down in a few gulps. Angie exited the primary bedroom, which was reserved for the sick who were thought to have less than a day or two of life left in them. Her face was flushed and her hair was a mess. As casual as one would say hello, Angie told Peter, Walton just passed. This morning, this minute. Almost to himself, Peter said, I should call the news desk. Angie huffed, for fuck's sake, that's your first thought? Sorry, but it's news. His family's worth billions. And they disowned him for being gay. They won't do any good for him now. So let me call it in, put it on the record, make them explain why their youngest son died here. Angie shook her head. I don't give a shit about sticking it to them. I want to see that Walton gets a proper burial. The Keller Funeral Home said they won't help me anymore. The few that will take our bodies only if we agree to cremation. Okay, then call one of them. Walton didn't want to burn. He pleaded with me. Peter cocked his head. You suddenly getting superstitious? Scared he's going to haunt you? He made me promise he wouldn't burn. And if you go blabbing it in your paper, they'll turn that pretty boy into ashes. Now, are you going to make a liar out of me? Peter put his hands up in surrender. He and Angie thought quietly for half a minute. Then Peter turned to me. You're going to have to get knee deep in this if we're going to pull it off. Are you in? Sure thing, I said. Angie side-eyed me as if I just materialized. Who the hell is he? This is Terry. It's Trey, I corrected. Right, Trey, this is Angie. Now that we're all friends, let's have a look at what we're dealing with. Peter led the way into the primary bedroom where Walton lay curled up in the fetal position. He was one of two white men staying with Angie, and she had been right. He was pretty. Honey-haired, blonde, alabaster skin, pink lips, and a model's jawline. He couldn't have weighed more than 130 pounds, been taller than 5'7", or older than 20. There were no signs of lesions or facial wasting on his exposed skin. I'd never been so close to a dead body before, and it scared me a little. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. He looked so lifelike. I wondered if Angie had made some sort of mistake. This pretty boy wasn't really dead. He was too young and gorgeous to die. I felt lightheaded as my mind frantically searched for a way to change what was final. Peter had no such turmoil, and he sized up the situation with a cold logic. He was a drug dealer, a hustler, right? Yeah, what's that got to... He overdosed, passed out in the snow, and died of exposure. Angie put her hands on her hips. And I found him outside and dragged him up here? No, he can't die here. Too many people will know what that means. So what then? Peter pointed at me. Trey and I will carry him out the back and put him in an alley. Give it an hour. Let him get cold. Trey will go to the payphone, call the police, tell them he was getting high with his buddy last night and the two of them passed out in the alley. Trey woke up. Walton didn't. You want to fucking dump his body? Shouted Angie. Peter paid her no mind and continued giving instructions to me. The cops will ask you for your name. Don't give them one, not even a fake one. You just establish that you were both doing drugs and give them the location of his body. Then you hang up and walk away. Can you do that? Before I could answer, Angie shoved Peter on the shoulder. Do you hear yourself? You want to toss a dead boy in the alley like garbage. He OD'd. His family will accept that. They'll hold a funeral for him. Peter rubbed Angie's arm. I hate it too, but it's this or he burns. The risk and wildness of the plan didn't alarm me, but then again, I wasn't thinking straight. While Peter laid it all out, I'd been staring at Walton, trying to place him in my memory. Had we crossed paths at Limelight or Ninth Circle? Maybe we sat near each other while eating at Florent. Did he curse me once? Did he cruise me once? Lick those pink lips of his and beckon me into the shadows of Morningside Park? Did I cruise him, flashing my crooked smile and giving him a sly wink when he looked my way at a street corner? We were young gay men sharing the city. Our lives had to have touched before his ended. Angie snapped her finger an inch from my nose. Hey, buddy, this sit right with you? You're going to carry a dead body and then lie to the police? I'll do it, I said, then adding as a challenge, unless you've got a better idea. My back talk earned the faintest smile from Angie. Look at the balls on this one. You want to join our mad circus, kid? Have at it. Okay, that's settled, said Peter. Let's get moving.
The end of the chapter is one of the most beautiful ones. It's I think Trey called it one of the proudest moments of his life.
Yeah.
How the chapter ends. And it always stayed with me. I thought it was so beautifully done. I remember when I was in New York, I worked for God's Love We Deliver, which delivered hot meals to homebound people with AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
And just as you described, Trey, they don't like soft pedal you in. They don't say, okay, for if you do this, they say, go up those stairs, you take a meal.
Yeah.
And really quickly, I remember going to the first client and just being petrified because I said, what will I say? I must be the most sympathetic person on the face of the earth because they are dying. I must be great to them, just so full of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the door opens and there's someone who clearly is in the final throes of AIDS and all they want to do is talk hair care products.
Oh.
And I realized they know they're not. I'm not
Yeah.
telling them anything they don't know. They want to say, is it Wella? Should I get Wella? What do you think? And I was like, we talked for 5 minutes about hair care products.
Oh yeah.
How did you create, was Angie based on a real person?
She's based on a couple of people I know who I adore, who are full of heart, very strong, and almost impossible. Just so, I mean, you know, like God bless them, but they're difficult.
Okay, Trey doesn't have a problem with difficult people because even Peter warns him, Larry Kramer, he's my friend. There'll come a point that I will not be able to be friends with him again.
Yeah.
Because he's going to cross that line. Trey doesn't have an issue with people like that.
I think it stems from the family he was raised in.
Okay, I was about to say, yeah, probably.
I mean, I think I come from a family where there's almost this feeling of we've got to do the right thing, but we don't have to be cheerful about it. You know, like I am here because it's the obligation of love or compassion, but I can also be like, you know, what a mess you've made. And I recognize that as a defense mechanism. I recognize that as someone actually trying to guard their heart, even though it can be pretty brusque. I mean, I volunteered at some places where, you know, people, I mean, I remember someone, I mean, that line of, you must be the dumbest faggot north of the Mason-Dixon line. Oh, that was me. That was, you know.
I wanted to ask you about some of the real people / characters.
Yeah.
Did you change any names to protect the innocent guilty? And how easy was it to say, yeah, I'm just going to use Fred Trump. Yeah, that's a name. That's what was happening. I'm just going to say it.
I didn't feel I had to protect any innocents, and they were sort of there for the taking. And so, you know, you needed a slumlord, and I almost got myself into this sort of thinking where you do the research, and Fred Trump is a racist slumlord. That's just part of the historical record. I didn't make it up. I didn't decide it. That's the life he led. And I thought, well, my goodness, he's just standing there. You could use him. But then you go, well, maybe I shouldn't. And then a voice says, are you scared to use him? Well, wait a minute. Now I've got to use him. So that's how you sometimes, the person I was probably most scared to use was Larry Kramer, because he was still alive when I wrote this, when I began writing this book. And, you know, you don't want to work on something for as long as a novel takes. And then, you know, I mean, there's a good chance Larry just shits all over it or denounces it or gives you, you know, like, and that becomes the entire conversation.
Yes.
And I didn't want, and I was afraid of it. But I'd kind of gotten to the point of, I have to do it. Like, if you're going to be in these circles, how are you not going to see Larry? Like, he's got to be at that speech, right? Like, I've got to do it. And then Mr. Kramer unfortunately passed away. But that also really like took all the pressure off of me, because I was afraid.
Well, again, one of the great things you do is this was the 1980s in New York, and there were certain people who were part of that world, and you really could not write about that era without including them.
Yeah.
I've got to ask, I hate to call it an initiation, but I don't know what else to call it. The act up initiation in Larry Kramer's bedroom. Was that a flight of imagination, or was that how it was really happening?
Well, it's both, right? It's a flight of imagination. I mean, Act Up is, what's wild about Act Up is at some point every chapter sort of its own independent fiefdom. Mm-hmm. And what they were doing and their agenda was all their own. So I knew about sort of the testing grounds that had happened to people during the civil rights movement, that before you went to the counter in the real place, you know, we pour some hot water on you here at home. And I had heard stories of some of those sort of things happening for people before they went into protest. The idea that you're going to be like, what to do if you fall to the ground or you're being beat, or how to take it. Now, it did not, as to my knowledge, happen in Larry Kramer's house. Okay. At the very top. But then once I heard the stories, I was like, well, the set piece was almost too delicious to ignore.
I just had a question. It just flew out of my mind. Oh, one of the things that destroyed me so much about the book is Barney. Yeah. When he gives the letter and says, "Take it to Neil," I think is the name of the partner. That sounded too real. I mean, it sounded completely real to me. Is Barney based on a real person? Is that a story you heard from your uncle?
That's not, no, but what I had heard in other stories I'd heard just growing up and over the years was everyone kept reminding me, because you'd say, oh, when AIDS hit the scene in the 80s, and they'd go, it was here before the 80s. And just trying to remind people that the public consciousness is what we sort of use as the beginning of the epidemic. But looking back into the 70s, into the 60s, there are people who exhibit what we now would think was AIDS. And so I wanted to have Trey have that experience of learning that this starts even sooner than you think it does, that it's been ravaging our community even sooner than you think it does. And there's an earlier chapter to this nightmare where your friends are dying of something that doesn't have a name, that no one cares about, and that you don't have any information about how it spreads. And it really did, it's almost a horror movie. Just people just turned on each other because they didn't know what was happening, except we seemed to be dying.
Yeah, I still remember when Rock Hudson appeared on Dynasty, and he obviously was ill. Yeah. And he kissed Linda Evans. And when his illness was, made public, everyone said he's infected her, because no one knew how it was spread. So everyone was like, oh my gosh, she's given her a death sentence. Yeah. One of the things you do in the book is, just as you were saying about giving us the real history of how AIDS started, you also do it with the Rosa Parks story. Yeah. Again, I will admit, I had no idea. Is that actually based on fact that it was this other young?
Oh yeah, Oh, that's down the line, didn't make any of it up. That she was, and that she had been someone who was very political and very involved in the movement and held multiple positions, and saw the window slipping by, that they had everything primed except that sort of perfect test case. And it didn't seem like it was going to happen organically. And she'd even had a run-in with that bus driver. You know what I mean? Like you can't sit down on the back and get the bus driver who goes, I'll let it slide today. You need the one who's going to stop and get the police. And she knew who that was. She was very smart. It was very, I mean, and it's a sophistication that's not often credited to her. Instead we sort of made her saintly. But she's a player. She's really smart. And I wanted to just remind, we do this with history all the time. We smooth it out. Because you don't want to get, if it gets too complicated, it opens up too many fronts and you're just trying to make a simple argument, right? If her full extent of her involvement had been known, then you're going, well, you're a provocateur, you're a rebel rouser, you're a plant, are you a communist? You know? But as long as she's a seamstress and her feet hurt and she just didn't want to get up, people could be sympathetic to that.
Who hasn't had tired feet? You know, it becomes universal. Said, "Oh, my feet, I'm so tired." Said, okay, that's happened to me. I want to talk briefly about Lady Fiona. That last episode she has with Trey, she broke my heart. She really, really did. I know she's not easy. I feel Trey's pain. I really do. Mom has the language to go head to head with anybody. I mean, she will just decimate all comers.
Yeah.
But when she describes how she made her peace, or as much as she could, with the disappearance of her son, and she rattled off those theories, it broke me. And because I thought it was so gorgeous, and she became so alive for me. This is how she has survived, and this is what she'll pick one. As she said, the husband picked one, stuck to it. He would never deviate from that idea.
Yeah.
She just kept bouncing from one to another because she couldn't land on one.
Yeah. It's tortured her.
Yeah. And when the FBI agent said, we actually have the file, we can tell you all that info, I could see where that would be the one thing that might make Trey say, I will break every rule for this.
I want to know. I want peace. You think there'll be peace in that folder?
Quick question before I have you read another one. He and Gregory were so tight. What was so gorgeous about it was there was some attraction, but it was more this friendship. And I found in the gay community that sometimes it's so much more precious to have a real friend.
Yeah.
Because hookups, gonna happen. Yeah. But someone you can count on, even if they like rag you, even if they like hit you, or I mean, not hit you, like, you know, but bug you or get on your nerves or will sometimes, don't be an idiot, slap the back of your head. Those are hard to come by. People you can trust. Trey had to make the decision at the end for Angie that eventually cost Greg something tremendous.
Yes. I think, I mean, what's, and this is what I think is sort of funny, or the twist or irony of being young. He laments, or he gets on Rustin about choosing the movement over friendship, or putting a value on someone's efficacy as an advocate, right? And yet he does it. He does it too. That he decides that Angie is worth more in the community. She does more good than Gregory. And so he makes that choice. He also tells him something I don't believe is true, but I think it's what he tells himself, which is, well, Gregory's a survivor and he'll land on his feet.
He thinks Gregory will bounce back.
Yes, except Gregory's been telling you the back half of the book that he's losing his charms. That whatever magic or appeal he's had, it's fading. Right? So he, maybe 3 years ago he was still young and fresh and he could have jumped back, but you're watching someone who's running out of steam, and
Yeah.
then to take this blow is it's devastating.
There's trophy boy, trophy man. There is no such a thing as trophy geezer. And he's going off the edge, and he also has feelings for the senator or the congressman.
He's let that happen. The congressman is he's somewhere in here. He's begun to believe this is the one who will take care of me, which is all he's wanted.
If you were to write a sequel, and under my desk, my fingers are crossed. Who do you think there's a chance Gregory and Trey could reconnect, or had that ship sailed forever?
Well, no, I think that would be. I mean, if I could, in my head, we'll see. But in my head, what I'm interested in is like when you get to 92, and by that point, Larry Kramer is denounced, act up as like run by lunatics. I would love to see what that is like if suddenly, Trey is still in that movement and Larry becomes the enemy. Will he turn do you turn your aim and fire at this person? But also I think in that moment, what would spark that is I think he probably won't see Gregory for years. I would like their paths to cross, and for Trey to realize whatever hellhole Gregory's in now, I put that in motion.
Yeah.
I've got to make it right. So.
Well, I because we're going to have questions soon, I'd
Yeah.
love to read another section of your book.
This is another one, and this is I enjoyed this because you're writing about the past, but you're also writing about the present. And one of the battles that happens now is it always happens. It's intergenerational, and it's young people versus sort of old people, and why won't they listen, and why are they so stuck in their ways? And I wanted some of that between Rustin and Trey, and so towards the end of the book, it's come up. I will tell you just for prep that Rustin and James Baldwin, who he calls Jimmy, were friends. Okay. They're in the bathhouse, of course, when they have this conversation. They're always in the bathhouse. I got Rustin to tell me more stories about the heydays of working with Martin Luther King Jr. An hour flew by. Rustin spoke of the past with no regrets. His admiration for King was all-encompassing, and I thought more forgiving than it ought to have been. I'd been aware that old Rustin was pushed out of King's inner circle and the movement because of his homosexuality, but Rustin at last shared the details of his ousting with me. J. Edgar Hoover began to circulate all kinds of stories about Martin, he explained. One of which was that Martin was friends of mine and insinuating that there was a homosexual relationship going on between us. This rumor, which I thought was preposterous on its face, managed to scare a number of the people around Martin. Those people set up a committee to discover what they should do to counter the rumor. And that committee asked me to leave in 1962, less than a year before the March on Washington. But you organized the march, right? Yes, Mr. Randolph and I were the lead organizers, and I was allowed to continue my work. The committee just asked me to distance myself from Martin. I grew incredulous. You were too gay to stand next to Dr. King, but not too gay to pull together one of the greatest political events ever? You must understand, even the people asking me to step aside felt awful about the position they were putting me in. The times were different. I hold no ill will against the committee or Martin. Finally, I was angry. You should. They did you wrong, and it was fucked up, and you can blame the committee, but Dr. King didn't tell them to go to hell, making him a homophobe or gutless. Take your pick. Cool it with the language and this ugly talk. What did Jimmy say when he found out? I demanded. Rustin squinted, and it took him a second to catch on that I was referring to James Baldwin by his nickname, as if I were the one who'd shared more than 30 years of friendship with the famed writer. I didn't relent. Tell me he called bullshit. Sorry to disappoint you, Rustin said with edge in his voice, but Mr. Baldwin and I never discussed the matter. What? How's that possible? You were two of the biggest homos in the movement, and one of you got shoved aside for being a homo, and the two of you didn't talk about it? There was nothing to say. Or rather, the two of us complaining about a political reality beyond our control was of no interest to us, believe me. All right. I raised my hands in surrender before firing another shot. It's just shocking is all. Jimmy acts like he wouldn't take shit from no one. And I guess he saw what happened to you and decided then and there that he didn't want the same treatment. Now I get why he won't stick out his neck for gay liberation. Damn us all then, is it? He yelled. Jimmy, Martin, me, our entire generation isn't up to snuff because we didn't burn the country to the ground. No, sir. All we achieved was securing rights you take for granted. The thunder in his voice left me speechless. Rustin took a long beat to consider his next words. It is difficult for the young to understand the strictures of the past. You want your elders to have fought every slight and grievous offense that came our way. But remember, at all times, even yours, even now, there are unjust laws and customs we abide. You don't believe me? Tell people you're gay and try to get a job as a school teacher. Take the man you love to City Hall and try to marry him. We have to be calculating about when to bend and when to rebel. I consider myself lucky to have spent 8 years working closely with Martin. In the back of my mind, I knew that my sexuality would eventually be used against me. I knew the ending would be abrupt. And I knew that my departure would cost me less if I conducted myself in an agreeable manner. You see, while I loved Martin, I loved the movement more. And if I'd have made a stink about a loss of status, I would have lost my chance to shape the march. I can live with my choices. About the same goes for Jimmy and all the homos in the movement you don't know about. There were a great many more than 2 of us. And as for Martin, in my book, he's not the villain. Hoover's the dirty bastard who set those rumors in motion. Once the evil was let loose, Martin could only decide how to address it given the political realities of the day. Martin made the call I would have made. None of Rustin's positions tamped down my indignation on his behalf. But I shut out all of the political arguments raging in my head, and I distilled my feelings into a single point of what I found objectionable and heartbreaking about the whole matter. You talk about the movement as if you, Martin, and the committee members were all chess pieces on a board, I said. But you were people, and you were friends. Martin should have been a better friend to you.
Last question, then we'll open it up, I guess, to outside questions.
Yes.
Who was the first person to read the book when you finished?
Oh, my husband, because he's laying next to me, right? Like I passed the pages over as we got through chapters. So I would say him, and then there's a small group, my writing partner, TJ Brady, who if he ever says, I don't think this is good news, and I go, well, let's forget it. My best friends, Alex Goldsmith and Ted Neal. So that's sort of like the opening group.
Did your uncle read it, who gave you all that you interviewed?
He read it eventually. I'm trying to think I mean, he's a busy man. I don't know. I know he's read it by now, but I can't remember when he read it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this. We have Q&A. Let's see. Oh, what book or books were your window into the gay world when you were a teen?
I was in love with Just Above My Head by James Baldwin, because Crunch and Arthur have a sex scene. I thought it was the most riveting thing. I couldn't believe you could write that down. And then forgive me, there was a whole slew of books that came out in the 90s, and it was about like being closeted and gay in Atlanta, and it just has flown right out of my head. I don't know if you remember them. It's like Elin Harris, is that who?
Oh, yes. I think that's the name of the writer. Yeah.
I read all of those, and then I was scared to buy them, right? Like they were too hot to own. So I just have to go back to Barnes and Nobles and read them in batches when no one was around. I couldn't purchase the book. I probably owe this man money.
I remember reading, because I don't remember reading any books that had gay Puerto Rican characters in it. And that's what I was looking for. So I would look for books that had gay characters. And even if it was like one section, like Valley of the Dolls, I would say, okay, they have a gay scene. I will read that. Because there wasn't a whole lot to choose from, especially with growing up in Puerto Rico. Here's a question. You said at the beginning that you wanted to write something the way you really wanted and different from your TV writing work. Now that the book is out, will your TV writing change? And second question.
Yeah.
Do you cook well?
Do I cook well? I do not cook. My husband cooks extremely well. I do not cook well.
Okay.
No, my TV writing fits what the parameters of that thing is. I think this book, as a book, if you sell 100,000 copies, it's a major success.
Yeah.
In television, if 100,000 people only watch, we're all getting fired immediately. And so television has this need to bring in a big audience. And when you want that, you have to make certain changes. I wrote this book like, your parents or family members like, oh, is the book going to be on the New York Times bestsellers list? And I was like, I don't think we're in danger of that. I don't think we need to worry about that. That's not, I wanted this for an audience who would dig it. I'm under no illusions that every person across the country is going to read this book. I understand that I've chosen something very specific, and quite frankly, most readers can't handle it and don't want to look in this direction. It's their loss. But I feel like when I'm in television, I've got a goal, and that's to get as many people to watch as possible. With the book, what's lovely is I'm free from that.
Yeah. Also, you get to write a book you're proud of, and it's what they always say: write what you would like to have read. If you were looking for a book, would you have liked to have read this one? You say, oh yeah. Yeah,
this would be fun. And I'm proud of the TV work. You just have to sort of know where you are.
Well, the beauty of the novel also, as opposed to television, because I love television, I love all of it. You have a budget on television too, whereas in the novel you're like, yeah, we just go from here to there. There's no we can't afford it. It's just it's the imagination. We can go anywhere.
No. I always tell people it's like, it's dance, right? Like what's nice about this is this feels more like freestyle. This feels more modern. Television is ballet. You have to get in point. You have to, we're going to have to pirouette here. It's very the boundaries are very strong.
Well, there's a question. Can you talk about the normal heart and how it may have impacted your novel? And to me, as the playwright, okay. How did it affect your novel?
Well, the normal heart means it's a landmark piece of work. It strikes me as awfully white. And that was, his experience and his truth. And that's one of the things I'm trying to counter. There's so many, Eddie, you probably do this in your plays. There's so many things that you do that it's not that you expect the audience to pick up on them. You just do them because they please you.
Yes.
It was so nice to have, and I read that section today, Walton died. It was so nice to have a story in which the first person to die was a white person, as opposed to that trope where the first person to die is a Black person. And that it recentered the story in the lives of someone who's a person of color. It made the other, white people became the other. And that doesn't happen very often in storytelling. And so the normal heart, I don't know how many times I've seen it. I love it, but it doesn't feel like my story the way this feels like my story.
Yeah, I find in some of the stories we see, we have to insert ourselves in them. We are not part of it. So we have to open up our imagination to be able to enter that world. It's weird because I remember I had a reading of a play, and it was a Puerto Rican hustler, and it was a white businessman and a white runaway. And they were doing a reading, and the director immediately set the white businessman in the center as if he were the main character. And I told him, I think it's the Puerto Rican hustler. And he looked at me, and then he said, oh my God, you're right. But that wasn't how he was approaching the work. He was approaching the work as it has to be about the world I'm from. Everyone else entered the world, but it's my world. The idea that the world wouldn't be his surprised him.
Well, and by the way, and from television, I'm aware of all those rules. Like, if this were TV, you would absolutely need a straight character who could be the buddy or the guide who would help the straight audience have a hook. Like Gregory and Trey would have had a third roommate, Straight Joey, and Straight Joey would have suddenly gotten dragged into this so that the audience had someone to hold on to. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing any of that.
just a comment here after this. I'm so excited to read the book. This was fast. Oh, good. It's a great book. So you definitely should get a copy and read it. You talk about could have had a straight friend. Well, that was Harrison and Brianna for a limited amount of time, anyway.
Until I went and messed that up. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my. His takedown of Brianna on a public street.
Yeah.
It started from her. To be fair to him, he didn't initiate this fight, but she came for it. Was there anybody offended by the book?
I think the book does a fair enough job of telling you what it is that anybody who was going to be offended doesn't even pick it up and read it.
Okay.
Like that. No one has yet, sort of lodged any complaint. Well, actually, the one, but I didn't mind this. Walter Nagel, who is was Mr. Rustin's partner and is still with us, did have a note that he passed along to me, and it's a correction. And in the book, I describe Rustin, who's in his 70s, as stooped and flabby. And he said, no, that man was fit. And he sent a picture of Rustin in his 70s looking very trim at the beach with his shirt off. So I was wrong about that.
It's weird. I guess he could have done this, could have done that, but he was fit.
Yes. No other objections. No other objections. I loved it.
Is there anything else you'd want to share with us about the book?
I'm hoping the book really does sort of just get people to sort of examine history and examine the stories we're told at large. I don't think when I talk about the civil rights movement, Rosa Parks, or we talk about the gay liberation movement, this isn't common. This is just what happens to history. That history is the acceptable narrative of the dominant culture.
Yes.
And it typically is all the dominant culture can handle of the truth. But if this history is connected to us, it behooves us to learn more about it and to go further into it. And the other thing I hope the book does is just inspire people to take up advocacy. One of the things I started at the beginning is I wanted to tell the story of someone who's an unlikely advocate, but becomes a great one. When you meet Trey at the beginning, he doesn't seem to have any of the attributes that are going to make him wonderful, but he learns. And he does have a resilience, and he does have a compassion, and he has a sort of an arrogance even, that all are very useful. I think sometimes when we hear about people who do great things, like someone like Stacey Abrams, they seem almost otherworldly to us. They seem so saintly and beyond us. They're you and me. They just decided to do something one day.
Yeah, I remember hearing her being interviewed, and she said how much she hated public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at her and said, "You're Stacey Abrams. You can't hate public speaking."
Yeah.
And we have to remind ourselves, I think it's very true, that our heroes aren't necessarily born heroes. They become heroes.
And also they have no sense, like they just do the work in front of them. You're just addressing the needs in front of you. Everything else sort of happens or doesn't happen on its own.
I see Omar is back. Omar, do you have any, because we have 1 minute left, so are there any questions you would like to ask?
Oh, thank you, Edwin. Nobody ever asks me that. I do want to observe that we are 3 men of color on this webinar, and that doesn't happen very often.
No.
2 of us being Puerto Rican. I'm Puerto Rican, Edwin.
Oh, okay.
No, nothing. I just had this was a really great talk, and it makes me think about my own teen years and the things that I picked up or didn't pick up. I always was, well, we're finishing up and I'm gonna drop like a big bomb or something, but I was always averse to AIDS narratives when I was a teenager. So those weren't like the gay things that I wanted to read. I wanted to read things where gay people lived and were happy. And one of my favorite books that I ever read was Maurice by Ian Forster, which was written by this closeted white British guy. This book that did not come out when he wrote it. It came out like 60 years after he wrote it. But it had an ambivalently happy ending, and that's what I liked about it. But you know, I still have not really read many AIDS literature, but I have seen a lot of it on TV. So.
Well, if I may plug for my own book, like one thing I wanted to do is like, even though there's a lot of heaviness happening, I mean, what's great about people of color, gay people in particular, is like, no matter what's happening to us, we find our joy, we find humor, we find we're not going to be defeated. Our souls aren't going to be defeated. And so I hope that comes through in the book. Also, just because I just got done seeing this in LA, they had The Inheritance parts 1 and part 2. The play was just here, which is all Ian Forster is literally a character in the play. If you haven't seen it, you should see it.
And that's why I think I loved Pose so much when it was out, was that there were people of color were centered in there, and even if they were going through some serious stuff, there was still humor all the time, even in the craziest moments when they were being so dramatic and hurting each other. So but yeah, unfortunately we're gonna have to close it out. I mean, we could talk about this for hours probably. Thank you so much, Rasheed and Edwin.
Thank you,
this was
Rasheed.
amazing.
I love your book. Seriously, love your book.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Yes, please buy Rasheed's book. You can buy it through our store. I put the link a few times in the chat, or you can also just go to our website. If you joined us late or want to go back and rewatch the program, share it with friends, please go to our YouTube channel. It's not going to be up until tomorrow, but once it's on, it will be public and shareable to everyone. So put it on your Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. You can also check. Well, some of us won't share it on TikTok, but some of us will share it on Facebook. or just email. You can also check out our events page to see all of our upcoming programs. We're gonna have a lot of really cool programs coming up. And finally, if you're in Connecticut or within driving distance, please join us in person for Museum Store Sunday. That's on Sunday, November 27th, so the Sunday after Thanksgiving. We're going to have free snacks and drinks, festive music, discounts at our store, activities for everyone, dramatic readings with historic interpreters, and holiday tours of the house. If you don't know, the Mark Twain House and Museum, well, the house goes into full Christmas mode pretty soon. We're going to be decorating it, I think next week or the week after. Yes, come visit us for Christmas. Come experience the holidays with us. And that's all from us. Thank you again, and please join us for the next program.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.